Hello, welcome back in, everyone. Today we are going to be playing some Legacy on Magic Online. Not something that I typically do for a stream evening, but this weekend there is a somewhat larger Legacy challenge, so I'm sort of trying to prepare for that. This is a deck that I was a very big fan of back in 2018. When Hymn to Turok, Baleful Strix, Snapcaster Mage, and Kolaghan's Command were all very, very powerful spells. I've come back to this deck with the intent of trying to add some new cards to it, sort of revitalize the strategy that was popular back then. And the games that I've run so far that I've been able to test this particular strategy with, I've been pretty impressed, I'm not gonna lie. The power level of Hymn to Turok is still there. One of the reasons why this card stopped seeing play so heavily in the Legacy format was because of the existence of the card Veil of Summer. Veil of Summer is not really at a high time popularity from what I've seen. Now, keep in mind, I don't play Legacy a ton these days, so I could be just basing that off of my personal experience lately with the format. But, the combination of hands like this, where you get to go play Ragavan on turn 1, Hymn to Turok on turn 2, you're just draining your opponent's resources and leaving a threat in play that's going to continue to pull you ahead. And that strategy seems quite powerful. I'm not convinced on the mana base that I've selected to go with today. I am including one basic mountain, mainly because I want a non-wastelandable red source for the purposes of Monkey. This was not common when the deck was popular back in 2018. Typically, the second basic was an island rather than a mountain. I'm sorry, the third basic was a mountain, or was an island rather than a mountain. So not super common that you'll see people play basic mountain. Here, there's a little bit of a consideration on which land I should play. I could play Delta, go grab Badlands, play Ragavan, and that leaves up Hymn to Turok even if we don't get to connect with the Ragavan next turn. This does get punished slightly by a Wasteland, but if my opponent's playing like a 2-drop and wastelanding me, it's probably less bad for me than if they're just playing a 3-drop on this turn, so. This hand on the play would obviously be much, much better being able to force a chump block with Ragavan. Feels like my opponent's deck could possibly be a Knight of the Reliquary style deck. Typically, Noble Hierarch, green-white colors is indicative of that. One thing that I'll note, I was messing around with the sideboard a little bit before this match started, Night of Autumn, so this is probably going to become a 4-3. Drawing a lightning bolt off the top would be ideal. Hey Edelweiss, how's everything going this evening? We are piloting some Legacy, so you tuned in right at the beginning of our league here. This being a 4-3 means we don't get to attack, but we do get to hymn our opponent this turn, which is pretty good. Wasteland Bayou. Taking the Wasteland from them is not nothing. So yeah, I was tinkering around with the sideboard here right before the league started. Not entirely sure on this configuration. I'm gonna try out 2 copies of Farika's Libation. When I played this deck back in 2018, we did not have access to black enchantment removal back then. You do have a couple options now, as of the recording of this video in 2021. You have Farika's Libation, you have Mire and Misery. There's one that targets, but you lose life equal to its CMC. Its a name is escaping me for right now, but Okay. This is a little bit rough for us. Drawing Baleful Strix is probably one of our better draws. Doing good, busy day at work. Glad to catch stream. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for tuning in. Second Baleful Strix is a solid draw as well. My opponent might start churning out some Wastelands here, which would be bad for us, but they might also just want to attack with the Knight of the Reliquary, which would make some sense. Activating Knight this turn, attacking with the Knight of Autumn for 5 also makes some sense. But getting to resolve this Jace on the following turn is probably going to be pretty good. Obviously, if our opponent starts wastelanding us, it gets a little bit more awkward, a little bit more difficult for us to do that. Opponent's tapping 4 mana. Okay, Green Suns for... Could be a Leovold. Could be second Knight of the Reliquary. Could be a Scavenging Ooze. Grist. Okay, that one's kind of new. That one's neat. Be interesting to see if they throw the Noble Hierarch at the Baleful Strix or if they choose to make a 1/1. I think it's more correct to make a 1/1 because if they throw the Noble Hierarch at the Baleful Strix, we get to attack the Grist down, and then we get to deploy another Baleful Strix. I think that leaves us very close to dead, but not quite. If we take that line, but they made a 1/1. They made an insect. Yeah, it's really neat that this card that Green Sun Zenith grabs Grist here. Okay, I was confused. I was like, why did the Green Sun Zenith go to the graveyard? Because like this card shovels back in, but he just milled it with the Grist because this mills one whenever you make the. No need to fetch really. Lightning Bolt lets us kill the Knight of Autumn. And then we can deploy a Baleful Strix. Alternatively, we can use the Baleful, we can attack the Grist and then bolt the Grist. That's probably the correct line. Leaving them with this Grist in play is probably not ideal for us. Go ahead and do that. Gonna go grab a basic island, I think. We'll go play Baleful Strix to start. Man, that's super tempting because they've got one card in their hand, but we do have to just bolt the Grist here, I think. How is Maverick in Legacy nowadays? I've always loved the Knight of the Reliquary land tutor decks in Modern. It's okay. I haven't played a ton of Legacy to know. I mean, Knight of the Reliquary has always been sort of a very middle of the pack, you know, like tier 2 solid threat gameplay. But it being able to tutor up Wastelands makes it a lot better in Legacy than it is in Modern for sure. Obviously, being able to tutor up cards like Gaia's Cradle here is pretty good as well. I suppose if we had Kroxud, they probably would have tutored up Gaia's Cradle and Once Upon a Time in response, but then they just have to discard the card they get. They're just grabbing a Windswept Heath, which is not that big of a deal. They drew a spell. They drew a Stoneforge Mystic. That card's very powerful here. Be interesting to see what they go grab. They can cast... They can cast a Cauldra here. Or grab Jite. Jite's a weird find. I think I would have grabbed Cauldra if they registered Cauldra. I think I would have grabbed Cauldra. Okay, just attacking with the 1/1. So they are going to get to eat our board effectively. But we're just going to throw the monkey in front of the insect. Is there a reason why Stoneforge Mystic is relatively stronger in Legacy and Modern? Primarily the existence of the card Brainstorm in Modern. I mean, in Maverick decks, you know, it's like fine. But mostly in the blue-white Stoneforge decks, you're going to see those decks be more powerful just because of the existence of Brainstorm. Brainstorm being able to tuck away your... Basically, Stoneforge Mystic becomes a draw one every single time you cast it, and a shuffle effect. So your Brainstorms get better with Stoneforge Mystic, and your artifacts, your equipments are much less awkward in your hand when you have Brainstorms in your deck, right? So if you're just like... If your opening hand is... you know, Batter Skull, Stoneforge Mystic, and then like, I don't know, 4 blue cards and a land, like a fetch land or whatever. And you get to a point in the game where you can Brainstorm your Batter Skull back to the top of your deck, play Stoneforge Mystic, grab the Batter Skull back out of your deck, shuffle your deck. Now the Batter Skull has become a real card that wasn't previously a card because the Brainstorm like swapped it for something else, you know. Brainstorm just makes the card, makes Batter Skull so much more powerful. Stoneforge Mystic in general makes it so much more powerful than it would be otherwise. I do believe we're probably pretty close to dead here. Yeah, we're dead. There's basically not any scenario where I think we can get out of that, unfortunately. We can like play Kroxa and we can't bring it back that turn. So, Plague Engineer is probably pretty solid for Rika's Libation, just being extra removal. So, part of the reason why I wanted something like Farika's Libation was because of decks like Maverick that exist. You want some number of Diabolic Edict effects for things like Emrakul, Grizzlebrand, but then you also want a way to eat enchantments against these random like green decks that are playing things like Choke or you know, against Sneak and Show, you can grab a Sneak Attack, that kind of thing. But I went with Farika's Libation specifically because it's instant speed over something like Mire in Misery, which is arguably a better card on, you know, in some cases, but it's not strictly better. I think I'm preferring the instant speed over the sorcery speed, but I could be wrong about that. I think edict effects are ones that you kind of want to be instant speed. Diabolic Edict being the primary one that we used to use back in 2018 was definitely very popular. There's a Liliana's Triumph that they've printed since then. That card's strictly better than Diabolic Edict. So if you're going to play the 2-mana ones for just creatures, you should be playing the Liliana's one. But in any case, I'll go ahead and figure out how I'm sideboarding here before I run out of time. Plague Engineer, Farika's Libation are fine. You could bring in the Alpine Moon. That's probably not too bad. Funnily enough, I was playing 2 Blood Moons in the sideboard. Decided to swap them out for the Farika's Libations because in some ways they're fulfilling similar roles, and I don't think Blood Moon's as powerful as it once was. Pithing Needle is probably okay, and then like Nile Spellbomb. Is there any cards that aren't super great in this pile? Not really. I think we'll just run it like this. Ragavan's not at its best. We can board out 1 Ragavan for a Pithing Needle. I think that makes a lot of sense. You can name Grist, you can name Knight of the Reliquary, Wasteland. It's a lot of good hits with Pithing Needle. Is that why the iterations of Jeskai Monkey Blade always run some number of Jace? Not necessarily. Jace is obviously just a very powerful planeswalker, but the thing about Brainstorm and the equipments is a much more realistic way of putting the equipments back in your deck and letting Stoneforge Mystic draw you a card. You can't reliably say, oh, well, you know, like, in the games where I open Sword of Fire and Ice, Batterskull, and Cauldron in my opening hand, it's okay. It's not a big deal because I have 2 copies of Jace in my deck to put them back in my deck. Like, you can't reliably say that that's going to be a good exchange for you. So That's not, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the reason why those decks play Jace. It's just a good 4-mana threat. Blue Planeswalker pulls you ahead, you know, that kind of thing. We're gonna go grab Badlands here on turn 1 and Thoughtseize my opponent. Well, a little bit punished for grabbing Badlands. I'm gonna go ahead and take their Green Sun Zenith. They're likely gonna wasteland my first land. Their hand contains 2 wastelands. I'm gonna go ahead and play basic Island and Ponder. Okay, we'll take the Mountain and the Snapcaster Mage second. Played Windswept Heath. Go grab basic Swamp here. Play out Baleful Strix. Can get plowed, but not a huge deal. Pharika's Libation is a pretty solid draw. Again, part of the reason why we're playing a card like this is because of the existence of Choke in these decks. Typically, they'll bring in a couple copies of Choke, and Pharika's Libation being somewhat of a double purpose, being able to take out creatures and be able to take out the Choke is pretty solid. So here I think I want to brainstorm. Plague Engineer is pretty solid, so I don't think it matters a ton. The Jace isn't getting cast anytime soon. I'll just put the Pithing Needle back on top. And I think this turn I want to dash Monkey. And this just forces them to plow now. The upside with doing it this way is that they can't, like, they have no time to do Knight of the Reliquary shenanigans and go buy a Caracas to make our Ragavans awkward. That's one of the major downsides of playing something like Ragavan is the existence of Caracas. I'm gonna go ahead and attack here. If they want to block and trade with the Monkey, it's not that big of a deal. I'm gonna Plague Engineer next turn and eat their Noble Hierarch. This trades 1-for-1 with a fetch land, and Plague Engineer is going to trade 2-for-1 with a Swords and a Noble Hierarch. We're just like slowly grinding our advantage here. Plague Engineer from them, naming Bird. We'll name Human. And not only does this shut off Noble Hierarch, it also turns off things like Knight of Autumn. It also makes their... So this is a spot where Pharika's Libation is specifically dual purpose. Like you get the option of... And this is a good spot for Mire and Misery as well. So Mire and Misery says each opponent sacrifices a creature or an enchantment. So if we cast Mire and Misery on the following turn, they would have the option of sacrificing Carpet of Flowers or Plague Engineer. They would get to choose in that scenario. Whereas for Pharika's Libation, we choose which one that they sacrifice. They're either going to choose a creature or they're choosing an enchantment. Obviously, they get to choose which of their creatures or which of their enchantments they sacrifice, but currently given that they only have one of each, we get to pick basically. So I'm gonna go ahead and ponder, looking to find a third land, or a fourth land rather. Didn't hit. We could just grab the Kroxa here, which isn't terrible. I think I'm gonna shuffle that. Ragavan. I think I'll go ahead and dash the monkey. Just get in for 4. And they're probably going to plow something, block the other one if I had to guess. We'll just like trade creatures and trade. And they'll deploy some silly creature next turn. Perhaps not. Just want to keep their Plague Engineer around. We could choose to Snapcaster Mage Thoughtseize at some point here. Tithing Needle may find a spot here to be good. Found a Wasteland. All 3 of our basics are in play, so any land that we put in play at this point is going to get Wastelanded. Ponder. So I think I'll start there. So I kind of like all of these options, all of these cards rather. So this turn we can put the Badlands on top of our deck, draw that, play Badlands. Oh, no, wait. We do actually have to grab the sea, which kind of stinks. Yeah, that does stink. In my head, we were going to be able to play Snapcaster Mage off of Badlands Swamp Mountain, but we cannot do that. We won't have double blue for Jace either. So this is one spot where we are getting punished for playing one mountain over double island. So we can grab C, play Snapcaster Thoughtseize, take their Cauldra. That we get punished with that line if they have Veil of Summer. And we get punished pretty hard if they have Veil of Summer by that line. So I think this turn, I just want to go Brainstorm, Underground Sea, Badlands on top, no shuffle. Deploy the Badlands, Tithing Needle, Stoneforge Mystic. I think that's the best thing we could have done with that turn, but one thing I will note is that Farigha's Libation being 3 mana here is a tad bit awkward. If this was about Diabolic Edict, we probably would have already fired it off. Well, that's quite bad for me. Basically means this next turn, Jace is going to have to eat the Cauldra token. Still don't want to trade here. So, not dead yet. Still got some fight in us. Jace is gonna get to eat this. If they have another removal spell, they do get to kill the Jace. But as it stands, it looks like we may get to untap with Jace. Even if we don't, we still have Snapcaster Mage plus some of the spells in our graveyard. We have a Brainstorm on top of our library. Notably, Carpet is going to make 2 mana this turn for them if they choose to use that ability, but it looks like they might be just a little bit mana flooded. So, but to be clear, that's not necessarily a good thing for us. Right now, the Carpet making 2 mana and them having 4 lands does mean that they are 1 mana away from just moving the Kaldra. I'm gonna go ahead and Brainstorm here. Just gonna start there. Fatal Push. Colligan's Command. So probably going to just put some of these guys back. Start there. Playing the 3rd island does mean they get their 3rd mana. They can now move Kaldra if they want to, but it's not a big deal. We can just point one of our removal spells at it. I think here I'm just going to Fatal Push this, and then Farika's Libation, the Carpet. Suppose we could also just K-Command, make them discard, pick up Monkey. I think I like that line a little bit better. Pick up Monkey and make you discard. Now we have 2 permanents that are going to continue to pull us ahead on this board state. Opponent discards a Tropical Island. Previously a color I was not aware that they were playing. They probably have a 1 of Leovold as a Green Sun Zenith target, if I had to guess. These back, play out the Monkey. I did draw Leovold. It's a tad bit awkward because this does target. So I get to draw a card. It's not the end of the world. Snap Colligan's Command does kind of clean up the card that they drew, and oh, they drew a Plow. It's definitely annoying. Means they're kind of keeping pace with us. Let's go ahead and Brainstorm. Back Thoughtseize and a Brainstorm, and we'll go ahead and deploy Kroxa. And we'll pass. So we're like currently ahead, obviously, because of the Jace, but that could definitely change here at any point. Once upon a time, okay? Can't interact with that one. Grabbed a Questing Beast. What a card. Okay, well, we are going to snap Fatal Push that one. Go ahead and grab a Badlands. Would be one spot where Diabolic Edict would be slightly better. Liliana's Triumph as well would have been slightly better than Farika's Libation in this particular scenario. Because it eats the Questing Beast and also would have eaten the Leovold without targeting, which is pretty relevant. Okay, don't need him, don't need second Jace. Just gonna go ahead and play out this fetch land. And we'll go ahead and just play Kroxa, red, black. Exiling 5 lands. Go ahead and grab a volcanic island. And in their draw step, I'm going to pick up Baleful Strix and then make them discard a card. And then obviously if they've drawn a plow, we're still playing Magic, but we're mostly so far ahead that it kind of just doesn't matter at this point. Anything that I want to change for game 3? Not a ton. Red Elemental Blast is just about as good as any other removal spell against Leovold, especially when you're targeting it in play, which is mostly how they're going to get that card in play is through something like Green Sun Zenith. So you can't Red Blast the Green Sun Zenith. You can only Red Blast the Leovold while it's on the stack, or you have to Red Blast it while it's in play, which draws them a card anyways. There's not really a ton of reasons to bring in the Red Blast for the 1 or 2 blue cards they may be playing. This would very much be a good matchup for Blood Moon. So score 1 Blood Moon, score 0 Alpine Moon, Farika's Libation. Even on this hand, Farika's Libation being 3 mana is slightly awkward, to the point where I'm starting to think that Farika's Libation is probably not the way you want to go. Does make me wonder. The thing is that I would love to play Mire in Misery if it was instant speed. It kind of does everything you really want it to do. It just sacrifice a creature, sacrifice an enchantment, but it does it at sorcery speed. It is each opponent too, which is great. It's not like Innocent Blood. I think Innocent Blood is the card I'm thinking of. Yeah, that's the one. So Innocent Blood's obviously like the best scenario, if best case scenario if your opponent's playing creatures, you're not. But something like Mire and Misery is best if you're just wanting to remove your opponent's creatures. Fatal Push is a really good draw. Let's go ahead and go grab Basic Swamp, I think. Kill that thing. And then, like, yeah, time and time again, I'm just thinking that maybe Mire and Misery would be better. But, like, here, I guess it doesn't really matter a ton. My opponent's not doing anything on this turn. So, I'm going to go ahead and play out Tarn, which might be slightly incorrect. We'll see. how it kind of pans out. Wait, drawing a card? Scrib Ranger. Interesting. Okay. So like right here, if we had an Edict effect, I would probably go ahead and cast it on 2 mana. One thing to consider, Myron Misery is kind of the name card that I'm trying to figure out if that one's good or not. And Myron Misery would not have traded on par for mana right there. Obviously, we're currently ahead on cards. My opponent mulliganed to 6, so, you know, I'm not like... The tempo of this match is probably not going to be the deciding factor. It's going to be who's ahead on cards. But being able to kill the Scrib Ranger would have meant that this 3 mana threat would not be coming down here. Go ahead and grab Basic Island. And we're going to go Snapcaster Fatal Push for the Knight of the Reliquary. I suppose the main concern with playing something like Farika's Libation is the fact that on 3 mana, Culligan's Command is kind of the namesake card in this deck. Being able to rebuy your Snapcaster Mages, your Baleful Strixes, you know, a number of very powerful threats that this deck currently has access to. And by playing another 3 mana instant in your sideboard, it sort of clogs up that slot. Whereas normally your sideboard cards being 2 mana is the go-to. I'm just going to... I'm gonna go ahead and attack with Snapcaster Mage if they want to try and be cute and like pick up their land, block with Scrib Ranger. Like by all means, we'll go ahead and let them pick up their land and we'll kill it in combat. Our hand's pretty good, but if they have a Veil of Summer, it gets slightly worse. Like currently, the only way we have to kill Scrib Ranger without really targeting it is by blocking with Baleful Strix or Snapcaster Mage, and that has Pro Blue, so that is not currently an option. I'll let them go ahead and Green Sun Zenith for 1. Grab a Noble Hierarch. Go ahead and Brainstorm here. And we'll put back Fetch Land, Brainstorm. We'll grab Basic Mountain and Farika's Libation here in combat. Just kind of want to get this card out of my hand, if I'm being honest with you. It's just so mana efficient. Just trying to throw it away is the best thing I can do here. And the only reason it's going to get to convert here effectively to some degree is just because our opponent's fumbling on mana. So I think I've pretty sufficiently decided that Farika's Libation is not the way to go for enchantment removal. The other options, like I mentioned earlier, are... Let's see if I can pull them back up here. I can spell enchantment, instant, sorcery, black cards. So yeah, it's Mire and Misery, Feed the Swarm, and Farika's Libation. Those are your 3 options in black. They sacrificed the Scrib Ranger, is kind of what I expect them to do, what I expected them to do. Go ahead and start with a Baleful Strix. Jace is a pretty solid draw. Just play this Volcanic Island, and we will call against command to kill and make them discard. Kind of plow out of their hand. It's possible I should have started on Ponder this turn instead of Baleful Strix. Ponder would have meant that we would have been able to find Jace and then cast it, but I don't think it matters a ton. Monkey. We'll just go Ponder, Monkey, Jace. Crux is pretty solid. Still want to stick to the plan of Ponder, Monkey, Jace. I do want to grab a Badlands here. We currently have 3 islands in play, and just putting more islands in play makes it better if our opponent draws into a Carpet of Flowers, but my opponent's off it. He said, no more. I cannot beat your Grixis control deck, sir. You have bested me. So there's obviously a lot of cards that we could play in a shell like this. I was even, at one point in time, I was testing out Douthie Voidwalker, which I think is an interesting idea. The problem with playing something like Douthie Voidwalker is I feel like if you want to play something like Douthie, Douthie is a good 2-mana creature. Like it fulfills your 2-drop slot pretty well. Obviously Douthie plays really well with Hymn to Turok and really well with Thoughtseize, and it plays really well in the Legacy format too. Just in general, there are more Grizzlebrands, there are more Emrakuls running around in the Legacy format to get you free wins. If you just go Douthie, Thoughtseize, you take your Emrakul, right? Then there are in Modern. That being said, because Douthie is a 2-mana threat, you kind of want to trim on some of your other 2-mana threats, which means cutting Snapcaster Mage or Baleful Strix. And I wouldn't really I wouldn't consider Crux a 2-mana threat, even though he's like kind of 2-mana on the front half. He's not really a 2-mana threat. Just gonna go basic Swamp Go. So that being said, once upon a time, that being said, if you want to play Douthie, you kind of have to trim Baleful Strix, and because you really don't want to cut Snapcaster Mage from a deck like this. Opponent finds Hollow One. This is probably a terrible matchup for us. This is a matchup where we would want Douthie Voidwalker. I'll play out my fetch land, but it's not typically correct to play your fetch land when you're just holding other lands. If you're wanting to like try and brainstorm some of these cards back. Really wish we could Force a Will this, but we do not currently have a second blue card. So, okay, so to finish my thought about Baleful Strix, Douthie Voidwalker, if you want to cut Baleful Strix for Douthie Voidwalker, your Force of Wills get a lot worse, like significantly worse. Your blue count drops to like 10 or something like that, because currently we're playing a relatively low blue count for a deck that would call itself a blue deck. Yeah, this is bad. So we're gonna have to Fatal Push this Vengevine, which it's basically a losing line, but kind of what we gotta do. Next turn, we do get to 2-for-1 the Hollow One Blazing Root Wallow with Culligan's Command. Go ahead and play out Croxa. I know that they're a madness deck, and you know, making them discard is not exactly ideal, but some consideration to just hemming them here. I think I'm supposed to, because like we have Croxa in our graveyard, so the game plan is to get that in play, but yeah, we just discarded an Ox and a Basking Root Walla for them. It's just like not a good matchup for sure. And they're cycling Cephalid Coliseum just to dig through their deck. Basking Root Wall, or a Blazing Root Walla rather. Good news for us is that they didn't find any madness creatures. They could have found Hollow One there. Found Jace. I'm off it. Jace is like our best draw right there, and it doesn't stand a chance. So we want Hydroblast. You probably want the Surgicals and the Nile Spellbomb for sure. Force and Negations are probably pretty solid as well. You really don't want Hymn to Turox or Thoughtseizes. These are like your worst cards. Even the removal spells are pretty awkward. They're just not very good. The monkeys are not very good either. Monkeys are never getting in. We probably bring in Plague Engineers over a couple copies of Monkey. Just trim like 3 monkeys for Plague Engineers. And then do we bring in like Alpine Moon for Cephalid Coliseum? Probably. Like, Monkey's not doing anything in this matchup, basically. Okay, we got a turn 1 Nile Spellbomb, which is like kind of all we can hope for, really. It's like probably the best card in our deck. And I wouldn't even say it's like end all be all, because they're a madness deck. So the cards that they discard aren't like reanimated or brought back or anything like that. They just discard them into exile and then cast them for 0 mana. And then we just have to beat the Hollow Ones in play. Now, to be fair, beating Hollow Ones not the biggest problem for this deck. We are playing three Call Against commands. So that's kind of a win for us, but still not exactly ideal. Okay, we're on 1 creature. No second creature for the Vengevine. Start with a Brainstorm. I'm going to put back Croxa and a Badlands. Let's play this Bloodstained Mire. Hold up. Nile Spellbomb activation. Let's draw a card. I also have Force and Negation. Up. Opponent does nothing. What does that mean? I don't know. I have no idea what their hand could be where they just don't want to do anything. It's just like a ton of lands, I guess. Just gonna play Volcanic Islands, they go, I guess. One thing I will note, at one point in time, this deck was playing an Ensnaring Bridge, long time ago, and if decks like this are currently popular, Ensnaring Bridge might not be the worst idea. Ensnaring Bridge was more for like the Eldrazi matchup, beating Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, in combat. Obviously that card's like kind of difficult to beat. That was a bad example to start with, but Thought Knotseer, Reality Smasher, that's more realistic. Trop Go? I have no idea what's going on. I guess I'm gonna go Snap Brainstorm. Just try and get some pressure down and filter through our hand a little bit. Snare of Surgical Extraction's a pretty solid draw. Put Force on top. Draw into Force of Will. So we do need to find a Kroxa at this point. The Kroxa is kind of like the only way we're going to actually kill our opponent. Problem is that Kroxa also enables their madness, which is not ideal. This is just a terrible matchup for us. We're just playing like discard control, and they're just like, okay, pass my cards that you discard from my hand. Like, am I supposed to force a negation? I'm probably just supposed to like hard cast this force a negation against this, right? Although it feels kind of like they're holding up Veil of Summer. Maybe that's what their hand is. We got force back up for it. We'll just like, they veil this, we'll force the veil. Okay, it didn't have it. Didn't have it. Yeah, I'll let this one go. I guess I could force a will that, but yeah, we have the spell bomb in play. We have the Cycled Street Wraith, Lion's Eye Diamond. So this one I will go ahead and is it force plus surgical the Vengevines, or is it force plus spell bomb your graveyard? And then draw a card. I think given that we're discarding like all of our action, we're supposed to spell bomb. Fatal Push isn't terrible, but it's not exactly ideal. To be honest, though, I don't know if I would consider any of these draws ideal at this point. Like, Jace is kind of the only ideal draw, realistically. Just attack with Snapcaster Mage. They're taking 2. We have pivoted to the get 'em dead plan. Get 'em dead. Anger. Opponent just cast. Anger. Am I supposed to just K command? Probably, right? Actually, nah, we'll attack and then K command to pick up the snap. That makes a lot more sense. You discard. This is bad if they have exactly Basking or Blazing Root Walla, but because it's not exactly ideal discarding the Ox, but it's probably better than just like letting them hit 5th land, play Ox. That's probably, that much is probably better. So I guess this was a good discard. Plague Engineer, eh? Are the Root Wallas all the same thing? They're all lizards, okay. That's good for us, at the very least. We'll go snap K command this turn. Okay, they conceded. No further changes. Run it back. Hydroblast, you say? Well, that card's not bad. I would like to find a Surgical Extraction with this hand. Surgical pairs quite nicely with Snapcaster Mage. No, don't fetch on turn 1. I don't want you to cast any spells. Careful study. Well, on the bright side, we can't Hydroblast that one anyways. Vengevine Wonder. Nothing. Nothing from my opponent, eh? Brainstorm. We'll start there. That's a lot of lands. Put these back. Play this Tarn. Say go. Cycle Hollow One, you say? Wow. Wow, their draw has been bad. Cycle Street Wraith. LED? Are we like madnessing the thing and then like pumping through Cephalid Coliseum? That seems really like spewy. But we're doing it. So do another Ravager. Okay, remind me exactly what this thing does. Okay, so we have to beat 2 Ravagers and a Vengevine. I think I'm supposed to leave the Vengevine alone here, and we have to bolt the Ravagers, otherwise they just have way too much gas. So let's grab a Badlands here, I think, right? And we'll bolt a Ravager. Okay. That's all I'm going to do this turn. Next turn, we're going to Hydroblast the second Ravager. Actually, no, we're probably going to go Snap Bolt. Actually, you know what? I think I messed that turn up. Oh, no, wait. They can't cast the Ravager. I'm just stupid. So now we just Snap Bolt the Vengevine. And none of this matters. That whole time I was thinking that we were like, I was going to have to like beat two Ravagers. But this thing actually has a madness cost of 1 red. Okay, so this turn we're gonna go Snapcaster Mage plus kill the Vengevine. Gonna go grab a Volk. Snap Bolt. Root Wall and Pump. Okay. Take 4. Go to 10. Just gonna grab another Volk, I think. Gonna play Jace and Brainstorm with it here. Brooks is not bad. Baleful Strix is pretty solid though. Go ahead and get in for 2. The Root Walls have flying anyways, so it kind of doesn't matter. Reason I want to play Jace on that turn, obviously we can like Hydroblast the Root Walla, the Blazing Root Walla, but that's not exactly ideal. He's gonna go ahead and spend his turn killing the Jace, and we take 1. And it just Brainstormed with us, so 4 mana, gain 3 life. Brainstorm is fine enough for me in this spot. Okay, let's start with a Ponder, I think. A Ponder first, or do I want a Baleful Strix first? Let's Ponder first, I guess. Surgical is pretty good here. Ooh, okay, cancel. I do not want the other 2 cards, so I do want to go fetch here. Just grab an Underground Sea, blue, and black, right? Yeah, this is fine. Sir, Force of Negation is pretty solid, so we are going to get in with this Snapcaster Mage. This turn, we're going to go Hydroblast their Blazing Root Walla when they pump it in combat, and we're going to block the Basking Root Walla. No pump from them. Second Root Walla. I'm just gonna say okay. We do have 2 copies of Playing Engineer in our deck, so if we just find a copy of that, these just don't matter. Yeah, like. Put the Snapcaster Mage on top. We'll just play out the Badlands. Plague Engineer named Lizard. All right, so now it's their 1 land with my Hydroblast and my Surgical Extraction in my hand, all that kind of stuff, so. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was like, why are we doing this? We're spewing to try and get a Vengevine back into play. Okay. There was actually a reason behind my opponent's line. I was very confused there at first. So, that's kind of the appeal to this deck. I really like the way this deck pivots post-board. You lose a lot of game ones. I'm not gonna lie. The deck's not necessarily underpowered. It's a powerful shell game one, but your most powerful things are like the 2-mana discard and the monkey, and then like Jace the Mind Sculptor in game one. Those are like your 3 most powerful spells in game one, unless your opponent's playing an artifact deck, at which point the Culligan's Command Snapcaster Loop is very powerful in game one. But you know, we're not playing a combo deck, so like it's not like we can just like combo kill our opponent on turn 1 or 2 or anything like that. We are playing a control deck, so we have to control them, and you get a lot out of sideboarding. So having a well-built sideboard for these big tournaments is the main appeal to these kinds of things. So it looks like we're playing against some kind of Miracles deck. My opponent went Force of Will pitching Portent, and typically Portent is a symbol of playing some form of Terminus deck. Just go ahead and play Underground Sea and play out this Baleful Strix. Feels kind of like they might have Counterspell up. Predict. They did Brainstorm on turn 1, so they know their top card. This is 2-mana draw 2. Fills Terminus. Are we forcing the bird? This seems really spewy. Let's let the bird resolve. They have a force in their hand now, we know about. But one thing I'll note is that Force of Will is the best removal spell that our opponent can use for us. We are playing a deck that plays 3 Snapcaster Mages and 3 Culligan's Commands, and if all of your threats get Swords to Plowshared, you have nothing to pick back up, or even Prismatic Ending now that this card is legal. You have nothing to pick back up with Culligan's Command. So them actually forcing a monkey there is very big for us. I'm gonna go ahead and Brainstorm here. We've got a couple dead cards in our hand, but that was a pretty good pickup. Probably gonna put back 1 island and 1 of these bolts. Bolt's not terrible in the matchup. Sometimes they play Monastery Mentor and like Jace the Mind Sculptor, obviously. So we're gonna go ahead and fetch up an Underground Sea. Maybe it's just better to grab a Volk here. Probably better to grab a Volk here. Showing a second blue. And we're gonna cast the front half of this Kroxa. Just take a card from them. So we know that at least one of their cards is a Force of Will. Our opponent spewed an activation there at one point. They've got a Force of Negation in their hand that they just discarded. So their hand is Force of Will, 2 unknowns. Narset. Could let this resolve and just bolt it next turn, or even just try and resolve the Kroxa. I think I'm going to Force of Will this and just try and stick Kroxa next turn. If they obviously, so we know they have a force in their hand, so it feels like they're probably going to force back, and that's fine for us for the most part, because this next turn we're just going to get to go fetch land and then play Kroxa, and then it's going to be relatively difficult for them to beat that on card advantage, even with the Narset in play. It's possible it's more correct for us to go bolt the Narset this turn, brainstorm, try and find him to Turok. And if we find exactly him in our top 3 cards, then we get to him the last 2 cards out of their hand, and then they're just top decking. My opponent says they definitely lost to me earlier today. And I was testing this deck a little bit earlier today. So what's the correct line? We could just play Jace. Just resolve Jace. I kind of like that. Just get Jace in play, and they have very few ways to deal with that. Yeah. Let's do that. Like, we know they have a counterspell in their hand. Just Fate Seal ourselves. No, I'll draw Volcanic Island. That means we get to go Bolt plus Kroxa next turn. Okay, look at the top 4. Found a Prismatic Ending. Not a big deal. Fairy is a little bit annoying. Drew a card with it though. Bolt the Narset. Start there. Force pitching counterspell. Kroxa, we're gonna get everything out of the yard except for the bolt, I think. We did bin 1 Snapcaster Mage. Yeah, I think it's kind of close. Can make the argument for Snapcaster Mage or for Ragavan. Ragavan's better if, you know what, I think I'll do Ragavan. And we know the last card in their hand is a Prismatic Ending, so... Get to get that one out of there. I go ahead and Fate Seal myself again. A little bit awkward. If we left the bolt, we'd know now, right? Maybe I'm supposed to Fate Seal before casting Kroxa. What does that mean? I think I'm supposed to bottom that, honestly. You just need to look for Culligan's Command. It's really awkward. Snapcaster would be a very good draw if we had just left Bolt on top of our deck, but we did not. Here, just attacking the Narset with the Kroxa is going to be our best line. They have a Plow. My opponent's like awkwardly stopped me in my beginning of combat, even though they already plowed the guy. They probably play like a one-of copy of Council's Judgment or something. So they may have an answer to actually beat this Jace. I don't think Prismatic Ending is going to be able to take this off the table. I think it would be unlikely that they play four colors. Sorry. Opponents had some pretty good draws off the top. They found the force for our bolt against the Narset, and they had the plow for our Kroxa off the top. So my opponent is making a game of this, though they've gone AFK here. I'm gonna go ahead and Fate Seal myself. I'm gonna go ahead and bottom ponder. I guess Ragavan also would be a solid draw. Dashed Monkey. So we've got some pretty good hits. We've got 1 Bolt, 3 Culligans, 3 Monkeys. Okay. That was wild. I mean, I kind of had an inkling that that was probably how that game was gonna go. Which is why I decided to play the Jace the turn that I did. I think on that board state, it's probably more correct to play Kroxa on 4 mana rather than it is to play Jace. But it felt like my opponent just didn't have very many ways to actually deal with Jace if it resolved, and it felt like that was a turn where either Kroxa or Jace was going to resolve. So you just get like pick which one is better in play, and obviously it was a good call to pick Jace there. Okay, so cards that we want against my opponent. We didn't see red against them, but given that they mentioned that I played to them earlier today, I believe they were playing red earlier today. The Pyroblast Red Elemental Blast package is pretty good against their deck. Just being able to trade 1-for-1 with Teferi or Narset is pretty solid. Generally speaking, I'm not a fan of Force of Will in these grindy matchups where we trade 1-for-1 on resources, but it can be a powerful effect to have access to. But generally, I'm not a fan. So I think I'll cut down on Force of Wills. And I actually think 1 Force of Negation makes more sense than Force of Will. Like this being castable on 3 mana is somewhat reasonable. Whereas Force of Will just being 5 mana is kind of unrealistic. And seems good. Turn 1 Monkey, backed up by Pyroblast, Lightning Bolt. So there's some argument that you could board out some number of Fatal Pushes, Lightning Bolts, things like that. We probably should have boarded out. Actually, that's the card I'm supposed to cut in this matchup is Fatal Push. Fatal Push is kind of awkward, but Lightning Bolt is definitely one that you can keep in to deal with Monastery Mentors and things of that nature. Planeswalkers, it's fine. Fatal Push still trades with Monastery Mentor, but only if they've played exactly Monastery Mentor. Go ahead and turn 1 Monkey. They need a plow for this. Even if they have a plow, we get to follow up with turn 2 Hymn to Turok. They have the Prismatic Ending. Thoughtseize is a solid draw. Hymn you. Brainstorm to hide some cards. could have also just gone Thoughtseize hold up Pyroblast this turn. It's possible that was better. Take your Gideon and your Flooded Strand. Well, it's a good thing we took Gideon out of their hand because that card's basically unbeatable. Feels like they're going to try and play a Narset here, though. Yep, that's a Narset. Not the end of the world for us. We do get to Thoughtseize the Jace and then bolt the Narset. I'm gonna go ahead and actually, you know what? I'll just let this go. That's fine. Thought about red elemental blasting the Ponder, but perhaps it's correct to do so there just because Ponder helps them dig towards non-blue threats like Gideon and like Monastery Mentor. So for those reasons, maybe I'm supposed to go ahead and I'll take that. So we know they have a counterspell in their hand, but we'll go ahead and hymn them, and they'll probably just counterspell this. That's fine. Just trading 2 mana for 2 mana, just as a 1-for-1. It's not a big deal. Legacy, huh? Yeah, Jacob. We're playing some Legacy. I think the challenge this weekend is like a showcase or something like that. Whatever they're called on Magic Online, I honestly can't remember. But I figured I'd play a little bit of Legacy and just kind of see how the format feels and what deck I want to play. And this, I'm not gonna lie, every deck that I tried to play in Legacy, I was not enjoying. I was not having a good time. It was no fun. But then I was like, you know what? Let's just give good old Grixis a try. Let's just give my old list a try. So I started with my old list, card for card, and started making some small trims and small changes with cards as they've been updated throughout the years. And this is where we've concluded. I never updated the Stream Decker, so you actually can't see the deck list. Let's do that. There we go. Some consideration for going Snapcaster Hymn, but Snapcaster Hymn loses to them having like counterspell Jace on top, or like even counterspell Jace in their hand. Just cast the Snapcaster Mage and they counterspell your Hymn to Turok. Entreat the Angels. Yeah, this was a card that my opponent played earlier in a game that I played against them, and it's pretty difficult for me to beat this card. They're gonna make 3 angels here. Obviously, if we draw a fatal push, we've got some game. Just making 3 angels, eh? All right. I'm gonna make them discard here. Snapcaster Ponder is the only option that we really have, unfortunately. And we are going to die to the angels here. The game that I played against my opponent earlier, my opponent made like 4 angels and I was able to beat it, but I had Baleful Strixes and Fatal Pushes in my hand rather than Pyroblasts. I mean, given that like that's their game plan, I mean, we've just been able to beat them like on resources every time I've played against them, so I'm just gonna go out on the Fatal Pushes and bring in some Force of Wills. This obviously gets, like, Fatal Push is better if they resolve the angels, but I think Force of Will is better in general. Just bring in 1 Force of Negation instead of Force of Will. We'll do that. So we'll go grab Underground Sea, start, grab Ponder. Force of Negation. We need some action. Ragavan is action. Let's go ahead and dash this. Brainstorm in response, eh? Probably gonna try and put a card back on top that they don't want if they let this resolve and hit them. It's kind of a weird gambit that you play with Monkey right now in Legacy, because some players are like very keen on what Monkey does and how that affects them stacking the top of their deck. And some players are not particularly keen with Monkey just yet and haven't quite figured out how that works in tandem with them playing their brainstorms and things like that. So it's definitely an interesting juggling game right now. It's like, well, did they stack a card they want on top, or is it a card that they don't want on top? I definitely mistapped here. me a Ponder. Portent. I accept. Okay, M is pretty good. Baleful Strix is solid. So let's just stack those up. Just like that right there. No, I would not like to shuffle my own library. Wow, that's kind of a neat little trick though. If we portent them, like we could also cast portent and target them using their copy of portent. Obviously it's a little bit more awkward than just us casting portent on them, but like we could go that route and then like try and get a card off the monkey that we wouldn't otherwise be getting because we get to portent them. That's kind of a neat combo. It's not so good that I would be like, you know, oh, we gotta play portent in our deck now. No, it's like not that crazy, but it's fine. Am I supposed to force a will this? Because it's like a creature in the way. Probably. Just force pitching brainstorm. Okay. You can brainstorm. Let's go grab a blue, black, or yeah, let's go blue, black. Dash the monkey. Cast Baleful Strix. So even though Monkey's not necessarily drawing us cards off of our opponent's deck, just creating a slight mana advantage to be able to deploy a Baleful Strix on that turn is good enough in most cases. We would have one more treasure right here if I had played my spells correctly a few turns ago and or tapped my mana correctly a few turns ago. I accidentally tapped Badlands Mountain for the purposes of casting Monkey and left myself tapped out of Red Elemental Blast. Had to use a treasure, but not the end of the world. Let's start on a Ponder. Try and find some more hymns. Yeah. I'm just gonna cast Monkey here. They just don't even have a plow. Wow, I could have dashed Monkey that turn. They would not have had an answer. Let's go and attack with both first. If they have something to do with the mentor, like block and then brainstorm or something here, it's not the end of the world. We can just Culligan's Command the monkey back. Let's go pick up monkey, you discard. Ooh, don't want to tap out a black here. Or red, rather. Do I not enjoy playing Legacy Storm? I play a red-black Storm deck that combines the elements of traditional Ant with Ruby Storm. I am not personally a fan of piloting Storm, no. For one thing, I wouldn't be very good at it. It's just not really my play style. And I have never really played the deck a ton in the past. I think Legacy is a format that benefits you from playing a lot of the same deck, you know, and really just knowing what matchups you have favors in and things of that nature. So, Venser. What are we Vensuring? Are we just like Vensuring? Okay. This doesn't even seem that bad for me. Like, this is a 4-mana spell, and we'll start with Ponder. I do think we want the land, probably the Call Against Command too. And we'll just Baleful Strix into Call Against Command, and I'm just gonna play the monkey for 1. I just love the craziness of the combo and how sometimes you can win before your opponent even plays a land about 33% of the time. Yeah, it's Storm's definitely a you know, a wild ride. I can definitely say that much. It is a lot of fun when Storm does its thing, but I am more of I prefer to have lots of ways to interact with my opponent, and you know, having different axes to you know, win and things like that. Whereas you know, Storm is a deck that does what it does on one axis, but it does it really well. And you know, yeah, when they force your ad nauseum, it feels real bad. It happens, right? Sometimes that's just magic. So here we're gonna go grab a volcanic island, I think. I think we'll just whoop, tap for black. You discard a card, kill your Venser. I'm mostly killing Venser because I don't want them to be able to find a Caracas and start Caracasing Venser. That would be kind of annoying. Although it wouldn't be that bad for us. Finding the Badlands there is pretty absurd, though, I'm not gonna lie. We're gonna attack Teferi for 1 and then attack them for 1. And like, if they have a Terminus here, that's pretty bad for us, but yeah, like we just have 3 Baleful Strixes in play and a monkey, and maybe I'm not supposed to play monkey there because of the thought of Terminus, but it didn't feel like they were still playing Terminus post-board games. They obviously conceded without potentially having Terminus as an out, so what you'll notice with this deck is that, like I mentioned earlier, you lose a lot of game 1s. So in the matches that you win, most of them you win in 3. As of right now, you can see that our record is currently 6-3 on games. In Modern, I play an Azorius Control that plays Monastery Mentor and Thing in the Ice. That's a fun one. Yeah, I like cards like Thing in the Ice and Monastery Mentor. Those cards are a lot of fun to play with. Unfortunately, I don't think in Modern, Monastery Mentor is quite as good as it is in Legacy. Monastery Mentor plays really well with artifact mana and with 1-mana cantrips, and the cantrips in Modern are not quite as good as they are in Legacy. Mentor is also a little bit harder to protect in Modern than it is in Legacy. Things like Force of Negation, Daze, you know, cards like that are more powerful and more prominent in Legacy. Playing against Stryfo. Stryfo is a Magic the Gathering streamer who is popular for his Stryfo piles, is typically how they've been dubbed. The Stryfo piles are exactly as they sound. They're usually Yorion-sized piles of 4-color good stuff. So this is probably a rough matchup for us, unless they don't have an answer to this monkey. We're gonna hymn them before combat. They did not fetch and try and kill the monkey in response, so that tells me they don't have anything. Fawn off the top. Not gonna cast that one. Not gonna cast that one. fun, but the banning looting made me sad. Yeah, you know, every now and again they'll ban a card that's legal in one of your decks, and it definitely feels bad, but you always find something to do, right? So Ponder off the top of their deck is pretty good. Just lets us draw a card and keep digging through our deck. I think I'm gonna take this Snapcaster Mage here. Go grab an Underground Sea. I'm gonna go snap him. Took their Polluted Delta and their Dak Faden. Phoenix was so fun to play, but that was when everyone played Hogak, which was so broken. Yeah, Hogak was definitely a mess. I didn't play a ton during that format personally, but I do remember it vaguely. Just being a lot of Leyline of the Voids in the main deck and things like that. Okay. Let's go ahead and Kroxa, take a card out of their hand. Let's grab Volk and Baleful Strix. Honestly, Altar of Dimension was the fundamental issue, not Hogak itself. I don't know if I'd agree with that statement, I'll be honest with you. You know, like I said, I didn't pilot, I didn't play during that format a ton, but what I will say that I remember from it was that Hogak itself is a very broken Magic card. Just being, you know, a 2-mana 8/8 most of the time is very, very difficult for a lot of decks to beat. Opponent's going to try and win off the back of this Uro, and as of right now, Uro is going to do a lot of heavy lifting. So we're going to have to see if we can inch our way across the finish line here. Okay, so we've got some good cards here. This is going to be a tough turn, I'm not going to lie. So we can put our Kroxa back into play, which makes our attacks much better next turn. Or we can cast Hymn to Turok this turn. It's probably just correct to put Kroxa into play. So let's like put... we have to shuffle one of these cards back if we do that. Let's put the Hymn back, I guess. Right, I'm gonna have enough cards, right? So if Brainstorm goes to the graveyard, we fetch. That makes 6, yeah. And I'm just gonna attack with the Baleful Strix. Grab another Badlands. Oh. Black. Black. Red. Red. Cast Kroxa. Worst case scenario for me would have been if they had a Force of Will for that. So we're gonna get in for 1. They go to 6. If I attack with both of these, it's 2 more damage. So they go to 4, but I think I'm okay with just hitting with the Baleful Strix. Yeah, but so like the Altar of Dementia version of this deck is still legal in Legacy, right? They still have all of the same pieces that they had at one point in time in Modern in Legacy. All of those cards are still legal here in this format. So they're gonna gain 3. They get to put a land into play if they want to. And they've got 4 cards in hand. I'm not gonna block. I will happily take 6. Play a Baleful Strix, which is a tad annoying. They're fetching. We have a Jace, perhaps? Leovold. Okay, so if we go Bolt Leovold, they draw a card. Then we go to combat, we attack with everything. Culligan's command to take a card out of their hand, make them discard. I'm sorry, make them discard, kill the Baleful Strix. Then they're at 8 versus the board. It feels like we should have lethal, but like they can definitely still wiggle out of this. So I'm gonna start here. Oh wait. Play this land. Let's start here. Attack with everything. The reason why you want to do it this way is the Kroxa trigger goes on the stack. This ability resolves. They have to discard Leovold. Now we bolt the Leovold. They get to draw a card. Now we Culligan's command to make you discard, shatter your Baleful Strix. And now they have to beat all this power in play with the 1 card in hand, which seems highly unlikely. Okay, so Stryfo Pile. So that's how we're gonna beat this matchup for clarity. We have to turn 1 Ragavan and start pressuring their stuff with Hymn to Turok, all that sort of thing. So they're playing a blue-red deck, so all of the blast effects are probably pretty good. Nile's Spellbomb is solid against Uro. You don't really want to bring in Surgical Extraction against an 80-card deck. They've just got a ton of things to be doing, and Surgical is like not a very good answer to Uro in the first place anyways. So Force of Wills can come out. These can come in. Fatal Push is not at its best. You could bring in some number of Plague Engineers. I don't hate that. We'll just like board out both Fatal Pushes, 1 Plague Engineer for the birds. You can name Baleful Strix. And this is not a symmetrical effect. This is a one-sided effect. Unlike Engineered Plague, which is a symmetrical effect, Plague Engineer is busted out of its mind, and it's not symmetrical. It says your stuff dies, my stuff lives. I think this is all I want to run with. Not really anything else I want to change there. Definitely wish this hand had a monkey in it, but it's still a keep. Hymn to Turok on turn 2 is still pretty solid of a line. We have turn 1 Hydroblast up. You definitely want to cast Hymn to Turok as quickly as possible in these matchups, because Hymn to Turok is a lot better if you can take away key pieces from your opponent's opening hand. For example, if my opponent has kept a hand with 2 lands, hoping to draw their 3rd land drop off of like some cantrips in their hand or something like that, and we just take the cantrips randomly, then their hand gets a lot worse. So you have the option of playing Hymn to Turok or Baleful Strix on that turn. I think it makes more sense to play Hymn to Turok. It's not really a ton of... One thing I will say about Kroxa in this deck, these used to be Gurmag Anglers. I think it's... one thing I'll quickly say is I do think it's correct to play Kroxa now that this card is legal and Gurmag Angler is like kind of not super popular in these decks. This card's obviously worse on the front half, but on the back half, it's much, much better than Gurmag Angler. But it is just a tad bit awkward sometimes. Leovold is very annoying. Just gonna go ahead and cast Kroxa. Underground Sea on MTGO looks weird. Yeah, this is like the Vintage Masters art or whatever. It is a little weird, I agree. So we're gonna get got by this Uro probably. Cast Uro from their hand. Just seeing it without any text. Well, to be fair, our Underground's... Oh, no, it does. Yeah, Underground Sea has text on it, I guess. I guess you're right. I don't really think about it, honestly. I have a couple copies of Underground Sea, but I haven't looked at paper cards in I don't know how long. I have a Blood Crypt sitting on my desk here. So I'm like trying to piece together some Rakdos stuff in paper. Nothing to do there on end of turn. Pyroblast is solid. Pyroblast Uro off the stack. I think I'll deploy a Baleful Strix. So the consideration here is Baleful Strix is awkward against Leovold because Leovold says you can't draw more than 1 card. So playing Baleful Strix onto this board is a little bit awkward. Baleful Strix is not going to draw a card, but it is still just a 2-mana 1/1 with Death Touch, so it means they can't attack with the Leovold anymore. They're obviously never going to trade though, so maybe that's like reason enough to just be like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Maybe I'm supposed to go Pyroblast, snap Pyroblast, like for Uro. Just Pyroblast this, snap Pyroblast the Uro. I think I like that line a little better. Hi, this guy, 23618. How are you this evening? We are playing some Magic the Gathering Legacy Grixis control. So far, we are 3-0 in our league. We are up a game against the legendary Strifo Pile out of my opponent. Good. Can't remember the last time I played this. Are you referring to Magic in general or just like Legacy format? Because I also have not played Legacy in some time. But I have been playing a lot of Magic lately. Magic, gotcha. I'll go ahead and Pyroblast the Leovold. It's not the greatest thing. They do have Force of Will, which is fine because we have a Snapcaster Mage. So we got a Croxa. It's a little bit awkward because I do have this Culligan's command, but I think it's okay. So we go black, black, red, red, and just cast this Croxa, exile all these cards out of the graveyard. And that just resolved. That just hit the board. Opponent discarded an Angrath's Rampage. That's kind of an interesting card. I almost wish that my opponent just cast that one because that would be a card that I could counter with this Hydroblast. Uro, on the other hand, is not Hydroblastable. The real problem with not attacking is that man, this is super awkward. This whole sequence is just terrible for me. Like they just get to put Uro back into play. We just can't draw cards because this Leovold's in play. So I can go Croxa, make you discard, play Croxa, make you discard. Honestly, I'm probably supposed to pick it up this game because like we're just too far behind. If my opponent puts a fifth card in the era, yeah, a fifth card to replay the Uro in the graveyard this turn, we'll go ahead and Hydroblast this. I'll be completely honest with you. I don't know how this works. So you discard 2 damage at Leovold. Okay, this is 2 targets, so they get to draw 2 cards. I'm gonna concede to this. I wasn't sure how that worked, but because it works that way, we're gonna concede. So we can't really beat the Uros, so I think we actually do have to bring in Surgicals, which kind of stinks. I really don't like this card in these kinds of matchups, but we don't really have any other options, unfortunately. Had to try it for science, man. Yeah, I know. I know they're playing birds, but Plague Engineer is probably just a little bit too cute. And then we'll just take out like maybe a Thoughtseize is kind of awkward. Well, we'll just concede now. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, so you know, if you have 2 Culligan's commands, obviously you can. And if it only triggers once, I wasn't sure if it triggered once or if it triggered twice. But if it only triggers once, you can go make you discard 2 damage to Leovold, make you discard 2 damage to Leovold, and they draw 2 cards, but they're just looting. They just discard them. This hand is terrible if they kill the monkey, but we're gonna keep because I'm a greedy bastard. One thing I'll note is that playing the monkeys does make the mana slightly more awkward on turn 1 because you kind of usually want to grab blue as like an off source on turn 1. Thing about grabbing Volcanic on turn 1 is that you can't ham on 2, so you kind of have to pick and choose which ones you want to go with. I'm going to go with the volcanic island this game, but this could come back to bite us. One landers always screw me over. I mean, I think with 2 monkeys, it makes some sense. It's possible that was a mulligan, but man, turn 1 carpet is terrifying. This is reason to grab Badlands. But they're brainstorming, so. So I'd assume you're good at this. You know, I don't know if I'd say I'm bad at the game. But I don't know if I'd say I'm good at it either. Hit them, they exile a Tarn. So Stryfo's a well-versed legacy player. So they're familiar with how the monkey interacts in Legacy. I would not expect them to mess that up in any way, shape, or form. To some degree, I may choose to make some plays this game, depending on how they brainstorm. Too many monkeys is never a bad thing. You know, sometimes it's a bad thing. It's a legendary creature, right? You know, sometimes you just like wish you had a Fury in your hand to pitch one of these monkeys to, but it drowned the monkey. He drowned, bro. So we can go grab a Badlands and play out second monkey. I think I like that play. Oh, he drowned my monkey, dude. It's crazy. We do not have any way to take this carpet of the flowers off the table, by the way. I would just like to let that be known. So that being said, I'm not going to play this island because there is no reason for us to do so. Honestly, this game would be one where I would really appreciate it if we had just not played the volcanic island on turn 1. This guy, 23618. I didn't see the numbers altogether. Appreciate the follow, man. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate all the support. Well, that's a combo. I guess let's see what we draw here. Brainstorm doesn't do much in the face of a Leovold. I'm gonna bolt this boy. It's probably gonna pick it up with Grixis. Brainstorm. Put back some of these Snapcaster mages, ideally. And Snapcaster mage. Yeah, Noah the Bee. I'm not surprised that he's streaming. Stryfo's a pretty common legacy streamer. I recognized his name as soon as we started this match here. It's definitely going to be a little bit awkward to beat this particular Leovold Caracas loop, but we do have 2 Baleful Strixes in play, so hopefully the Baleful Strix beats can carry us some way. We just have to stop targeting the Leovold at this point, and we'll probably be okay to some degree. But Baleful Strix definitely makes that more awkward. As I mentioned at the start of this, this is a pretty poor matchup for us. Generally speaking, the 4-color piles are pretty favored against the 3-color fair decks. They're just a bigger version of what you're doing. They've got more colors to access to more cards. They've just got more of a toolbox. He's got a land in play that's actively being a pain in my butt. So it's definitely a rough matchup. I think the correct line this turn is to snap bolt the Leovold and then continue getting in with the Baleful Strixes. We only get in for one because the other one blocks. Maybe I'm supposed to do that on their turn. Maybe that makes the most sense. I don't think picking up Rag, killing their bird does much. The problem is that like no matter which of our removal spells we use, that we're pointing them all at their creatures, and as long as Leovold's in play, anything we target of theirs lets them draw a card. So we're just behind on cards every time we exchange one for one. So this scenario, I think, makes a lot of sense because it makes them use the Caracas twice in the same turn, which has some utility to it. They're tapping the Caracas. This feels incorrect, but what do I know? I suppose they're trying to just get their Euro back in play, which makes a lot of sense. Like now they get to play Euro, which is probably good enough to beat us anyways, as it is. So we're gonna go snap Bolt here in response to the Euro. This just means that they have fewer cards to draw to potentially find a Force of Will. If you do it after the Euro, then they get to draw a card off the Leovold and the Euro, and it's just not exactly ideal. Obviously, there's a slight downside to doing it this way because now they have the potential upside of finding a land off of the Leovold ability and the Euro. The fact that they chose not to put a land into play, though, is terrifying. Honestly, I think that makes me just want to concede at this point. They didn't put a land into play. I'm not beating this Euro as it is, so GG's, Mr. Strifo. We took game one because we landed a monkey and it rode us to victory, but not the case in that spot. To be fair, that's probably the worst matchup we played all night. It's unfortunate that we ran into Strifo, but it happens every now and again where you play against the 4-color pile and the Grixis piles, the Grixis control decks, any 3-color control deck for that matter is somewhat poorly favored against the 4-color Yorion Strifo piles. Bulls really made a comeback the last few months. I would agree. Well, this hand has a turn 1 monkey and a turn 2 him. Legacy is banned. I'm sorry, Luris is banned in Legacy, yes. Luris was a very popular companion while it was legal. And shortly banned after it was printed into the legacy format. Mr. Strifo, I appreciate the follow, sir. Good games, good games. That last game was pretty hard in your favor. I tanked on turn 1 for so long trying to figure out which land to fetch, and I decided on Volcanic Island. If I found Badlands, I think that game goes a lot differently, but it was a good game nonetheless. On this turn, are we supposed to him to Turok our opponent, play a Baleful Strix, or Brainstorm? We're not playing that card. Brainstorm. Who plays that card? Brainstorm, looking for a 1-mana removal spell for their monkey. They went Mountain Monkey Go. So that tells me they're either playing like Burn or Blue-Red Delver, and they just had like an awkward draw with their land. Typically they would want to lead on Volcanic Island Monkey Go. So if we play Baleful Strix, like worst case scenario, they have 2 1-mana removal spells. I'm probably just supposed to attack with my monkey and not think about it too hard. Like, this is like technically bad for us right here, but it's not too bad. It's not so bad for us that it's an undesirable trade. We do eventually get to Culligan's Command that card back in play. They're playing Painter. Red Painter. Magmatic Channeler, eh? That is not a card that I've seen him play in Legacy yet. Blue. Let's go with a Baleful Strix to start. Could have gone Brainstorm into Grixis this turn. Maybe that's better. Get to look at the top 2 cards of their deck. They're gonna choose probably the Welder if I had to guess. Channeler is kind of a weird card. If I'm being honest with you, I've never really been a fan of Magmatic Channeler as a card in any deck for clarity. Probably just supposed to force this, right? Force this, play Grixis, take the last card out of their hand. Let's pitch the Baleful Strix. I've never been a fan of this card. It's card filtering, which is fine, but like for a 2-mana threat in Legacy and Modern, you really want your 2-mana card to pull you ahead if it's going to be like a card filtering kind of card. And this card just doesn't do that. It's not even really good filtering, I would say. Just looking at the top 2 cards. Bolt, Fatal Push, pretty good draws though. Unfortunately, we do have to shuffle these away. I suppose we don't have to, right? So like, could put Fatal Push, Ponder. Let's do that and say go. Maybe I'm supposed to just kill the Channeler and like just play Grixis next turn. It's kind of close, right? So we can bolt right now and kill their 1/3, kill their Channeler. which means they don't get to filter next turn, but it doesn't pull them ahead on cards, which is like really the one thing I'm somewhat afraid of. The welder, on the other hand, is a little bit worse for us if they find a big artifact to put in the graveyard. I'm just gonna say go in this spot. It's kind of close, but not close enough to the point where I feel like I need to do something. They found Painter Servant Bolt. Yeah, I'm just gonna let this happen. We're gonna Kroxa not next turn, but the following turn. This turn, I'm going to bolt the welder to start, and then we'll fatal push the Painter Servant if it's still in play. Ponder. Kroxa. So now I do want to shuffle. I am going to take the fatal push to start. We'll bolt the welder to start the turn. Go ahead and attack for one. Not really any reason not to. So one thing to consider here is if they find Grindstone in their top 3, they can cast it, and then they're going to activate it, targeting us using the Painter Servant. So Phyrexian Revoker, what are we naming? Probably Jace the Mind Sculptor, if I had to guess. Can't name lands, so don't have to worry about fetching with Polluted Delta. Lucky Main asks, is Belcher still a thing in Legacy? Not really, no. You know, is Belcher really a thing in Legacy in the first place? I think is really the question. And the answer is not really no. It's never really been a thing. It is a legal deck in Legacy. Generally speaking, in bigger tournaments, people do not show up with Belcher. In your local Friday Night Magic, if you were playing Legacy against someone, they would likely show up with Belcher. In these, you know, pay $10, play a Magic Online League, you know, there's going to be somebody that may show up with Belcher, but generally speaking, Belcher has fallen off as a Narset Parter of Veils was the pick from my opponent. It's an interesting one. They're afraid of me cutting off their extra draws. So I'm gonna go ahead and fetch, just go grab a Volk, and then I am gonna go ahead and Fatal Push this Painter Servant, because I want to put the Kroxa into play next turn, and I don't want to have to pull up 1 mana to Fatal Push. Jace the Mind Sculptor, eh? Well, that card's probably better than Kroxa, and I'm going to immediately slam a Planeswalker and punish my opponent for picking Narset Parter of Veils. Culligan's Command, you say, eh? Don't mind if I do. Don't mind if I do at all. It's a mean-ass combo for sure, though. Yeah, no, I mean, like, you know, if you play against, like, elves or something, you're gonna win every game. You know, if you play against any combo deck that doesn't really have any interaction for combo decks, elves, you know, even like the pseudo mirrors in like storm combo, you know, where you're like trying to like win through Force of Wills or whatnot, anything like that, you're probably favored if you're playing Belcher to some degree, right? Like obviously storm combo has access to discard spells and a lot of them, so you know it's not necessarily easy to win through all the discard. I played Painter a lot in 2015 until I got K-commanded into Oblivion. Yeah, I feel like K Command's probably pretty rough for this deck. Like you got some cool new tools, but yeah, K Command's still pretty good here. Just gonna go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and shoot the Goblin Welder, pick up Monkey. Grixis Delver is so rampant in Legacy, though. I feel like everyone plays Control in Legacy. Yes and no. So the thing is like, Control obviously has a lot more benefits in Legacy than it does in other formats, because of the existence of certain cards. For example, Swords to Plowshares. Swords to Plowshares is a card that benefits nobody. Except for the person, like even the person casting it, you could argue that it doesn't even benefit that person, right? Because it still gains your opponent some amount of life. So unless you're playing a deck that has this game plan of, you know, I want the game to go long, I'm gonna win in a long game, that's a true like control deck. You know, it's very difficult for you to, you know, play a somewhat aggressive game plan where you're trying to kill your opponent with creatures. If you're constantly giving them life with your 1-mana removal spells, right? So, but what on the flip side, Swords of Plowshares is such an efficient answer to so many threats in the Legacy format that many of the control decks have found ways to win the game more quickly and more in larger chunks, I guess. Even through Swords to Plowshares. Now that being said, I know you obviously mentioned Grixis Delver. I don't think Grixis is like super popular right now. For the most part, Grixis Delver hasn't been seeing a ton of play ever since Deathrite Shaman got banned. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I haven't seen a ton of Grixis Delver as of late. Most of the Delver variants that I've seen are blue-red. Something like this probably is fine. And the Baleful Strixes, honestly, are probably not very good in this matchup. I think the discard spells are probably better than Baleful Strix. Blue-red versus Bant versus Depths, the meta. Yeah, that's kind of the vibe that you get from a lot of these games right now, for sure. You know, obviously we're still playing Legacy. We're still playing a format that is slightly larger than Modern. To some degree, players are just going to show up with what they own. But the thing about Legacy is that, for the most part, Legacy is not a format that people play in person anymore. One, obviously because of COVID, but even before COVID, the format itself is just a little bit too expensive for most players to get into. Let's start on Underground Sea. Ponder. Monkey. Is Monkey good here? I'll keep a Monkey. Might not be absurd, but it's okay. Pyroblast was always a funny board in that your opponents would run. Yeah, the opponent. Yeah, if your opponent boards in Pyroblast, like that's not That's not generally correct. Especially if they, you know, they just like play painter and name like white or something. It's just not correct to. This was the downside with grabbing Ragavan here. I had considered maybe if my opponent has a if my opponent had a 2-mana land, they were gonna get to activate Saga, which makes Ragavan a lot worse. A lot worse. So let's Pithing Needle. Probably gonna name Saga here. At this point, they've already gotten one construct out of the deal. I think I'm just gonna name Grindstone. And then we're just gonna like go Bolt, Snap, Bolt. And I am gonna go ahead and grab another Badlands rather than drawing the land or drawing the card that's on top. We know that there's another monkey on top of our deck, so not a ton of reason to just draw that one. Because the first monkey's probably not getting in as it is, with these two constructs getting in the way here. I'm gonna go ahead and bolt this first construct. The last thing you want to do is let them go grab an artifact that makes another artifact at instant speed. For example, Underworld Cookbook or something of that nature. I kind of doubt that they're playing the Underworld Cookbook, but you know, they certainly could be. So you generally want to bolt in response to them tutoring if they've already made a couple 2/2s. Rainstone, eh? Painter Servant. That's a cool card. Look at that. Look at that coloring. Well, Force of Will can pitch any of these cards now. That's kind of neato. Honestly, if they give me something to force, I'm going to pitch this Ragavan. Great. Now I want Monkey to be blue-red. Yep, right. Snapcaster Bolt's looking pretty good. Probably supposed to kill the construct. Nah, that's probably not correct. We're probably supposed to kill the painter, right? Kill the painter and then Jace bounce the construct. You know, honestly, I almost think it's probably more correct for me to just let them... It's probably more correct for me to just let them like play something there and then force pitching the monkey. And then untapping Jace. Like we still have the man, like we'll just keep the Snapcaster. We'll just do this on end of turn and we'll just force pitch monkey on whatever they do this turn. Now if I need to force something, I have to pitch this Jace. And this feels like an Imperial Recruiter, which I would love to have forced pitching monkey. Pragmatic Channeler, that card's way less impactful. Oh, I'll block. Cast Jace the Mind Sculptor. I don't know, man. Channeler was only active for like 20 turns last game and almost did something. Yep, that's true. Channeler was not looking super hot last game, that's for sure. We'll just tuck the Alpine Moon on top. And probably going to line up him to Turok on the following turn. We'll force a will of play if they make something relevant. And these Ancient Tombs are just kind of killing our opponent. One thing I really like about the Legacy format with the inclusion of Ancient Tomb is that so often your opponent that's playing Ancient Tomb will get to the point in the game against you. So like you're the deck that wants to go long. Your deck is like pretty good at going long. If you get your opponent to the mid game where they've had an Ancient Tomb in play the entire game, it gets a lot harder for them to play Urza Saga. Okay, that was kind of a weird turn there for them. They discarded Urza Saga to the Channeler, found Great Furnace off the top, and then played Urza Saga anyways. Himyu, Alpine Moon, your Urza Saga. Urza's Saga. Monkey Brainstorm. Yeah, I'll fetch up a Vulcan, just play the monkey. Don't think I want to dash, I'll just cast it. It feels like they probably want to activate Channeler. Pyroblast. Okay, that's a pretty good draw for them, I'm not gonna lie. That means that they get to hold back the monkey and kill the Jace. It's kind of like best case scenario for them. But Fatal Push is pretty good from us. One good draw deserves another, I suppose. So we'll get in with our monkey. Get a Pyroblast from them. Nothing relevant in play. Nothing pyroblastable. It's an Imperial Recruiter, Goblin Engineer, okay. He's Engineer. Looking for a Culligan's Command, a Snapcaster Mage, a Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt. It's a number of good draws here. Jace the Mind Sculptor. Croaks is not a terrible one. I think we'll attack with Monkey, force them into a situation where they feel like they need chump block. Or not chump, but trade rather. Feels kind of like a chump block, right? Monkey's done enough here. And just putting Croaks into play next turn is lethal. All right, opponent conceded. So we were, did we 2-0 that last match? I think we did. Yeah, okay, so went to game 3 in every single match that we played except for the last one. 4-1 in this league. I think the deck had a pretty good showing. Obviously against Strifo pile. The deck's going to be somewhat poorly matched, right? They're usually playing a lot more cards that are bigger. They've got more of a toolboxy kind of feel to their deck, and they're playing Uro, which is already a threat that's quite difficult for our deck to beat. So one thing that I'll note is that one of the big reasons why this deck sort of went under the radar in those formats where Uro got printed. Uro is obviously a very difficult card for these decks to beat. You know, once Uro hits the table, it goes to the graveyard and draws a card, gains 3 life. You know, it's the front half of it's bad. Once it gets in play, there's no way for this deck to remove it efficiently. We would have to start playing like Unholy Heat in order to remove an Uro efficiently. And then like if you want that to work out, you have to have Delirium, and having Delirium is bad against Endurance, which the Uro decks are also playing. So you know, beating Uro with this deck is not going to be the easiest thing to do. But the game plan with this deck is not to beat the Uro decks, right? Right now, we're trying to beat, you know, just combo decks, the Delver decks to some degree. You know, this deck is very, very good against those you know, decks that need a critical mass of cards to win. You know, even the tribal decks to some degree. This deck is fairly positioned against any artifact decks. This deck is great against. It's got 3 Culligan's commands in the main deck. So a lot of these decks that are trying to win off of artifact synergies, Culligan's command has a pretty good matchup against. So could Dreadbore help against Uro? No, I don't think so. The thing, if you want to beat Uro, you really have to play stuff like Nile Spellbomb in the sideboard. And that was part of the reason why I really wanted to play a couple copies of Dalthy Voidwalker. Let me get that card pulled up here. I may continue to do a little bit of testing and try and find some space for this card in, you know, either the main deck or the sideboard. But Dalthy Voidwalker is a card that pairs quite nicely against Uro. In the matchup against Strifo, if you know you have a Dalthy in play on turn 2 or turn 3, when they go to play Uro, or if you like discard it from their hand with a Hemder Turok, Dalthy just says any cards that go to the graveyard get exiled instead. So Dalthy is pretty good against Uro in general. So if you can find space for Dalthy, this is a good way to beat graveyard-based threats incidentally. That's the thing with Uro, is that Uro is a very good resilient threat, but it's like incidentally a really good resilient threat. You know, it's like this, like the back half of it's like good, you know, it's like, oh, it's a 6/6, but like after you cast it on the front half and it's already drawn you a card and gained 3 life. So it's a card that you have to beat twice, you know, and Dalthy is a good way to just beat it the first time. You know, you just play Dalthy, they can gain 3 life if they want to, but it goes to exile and you don't ever have to deal with it again, right? So Dalthy is a good like incidental answer to it. One thing that I'll note is that at the very beginning of this league, we talked a lot about Farika's Libation. After that league, I have determined this card is not playable. Do not play Farika's Libation. If we want to play some number of enchantment removals, it's probably supposed to be Engineered Explosives or like Mire and Misery or something like that. So probably we'll continue to tinker around with that in the future. But yeah, for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and close the stream off tonight. We had a long league here with Legacy Grixis. Probably not the last time you'll see me streaming this. Like I said, the challenge this weekend is a showcase challenge, so there's probably going to be a lot of players playing in this, but I will likely be piloting some variant of this Grixis list because I'm a pretty big fan of it so far. I think this seems like a lot of fun and it's pretty powerful from what I have tested. Hoping, like, fingers crossed to not run into too many Uros and too many Veil of Summers. So that's just kind of the game plan, right? Sometimes you just have to hope to not hit those matchups, and that's kind of the game plan with this deck. So in any case, I want to thank everyone for dropping in for the stream tonight. It was a fun one. Legacy's not a format that I play every evening. Mostly a modern streamer on this channel, but you know, if you want to check me out anytime, we are streaming on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and then we also stream on the challenges on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. So if you want to check those out, be sure to tune in then. If you didn't already follow the channel, feel free to leave me a follow. That lets you know whenever I go live. I also have a Twitter account at tstriker7. You can follow me on there. And then if you want to check this league out, if you want to see all 5 games, I will upload this to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/ThunderStriker7. You can check that out there. Again, I appreciate all you guys tuning in, and I will see you guys next time.